Picture a block party on a Saturday evening in 1982. Kids are tearing through sprinklers. Somebody's dad is grilling burgers in the driveway, while three families stand around in lawn chairs they carried from their own garages. Nobody sent an invitation. Nobody checked a calendar. You just walked outside, and there they were. In 1990, a third of Americans reported having 10 or more close friends. Today, only 13% do. 1 in 8 Americans now says they have no close friends at all. That is a 4-fold increase in just 3 decades. This did not happen because you became less likable or stopped trying. It happened because the entire infrastructure that once made friendship automatic was quietly dismantled around you. Americans did not lose their friends. The environment that created those friendships was destroyed, one structural decision at a time. Suburban sprawl, the death of gathering places, and the rise of the smartphone each severed a different lifeline. Here's exactly how it happened. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what friendship actually ran on. It did not run on effort, it ran on structure. And in 1964, 12 million Americans belonged to the PTA. Millions more showed up to bowling leagues, union halls, Elks lodges, church suppers, and Red Cross chapters. The sociologist Ray Oldenburg called these gathering places third places, the spaces between home and work where people met on neutral ground and talked simply because they were there. The barbershop, the diner counter, the corner tavern where the bartender knew your name and your neighbor sat 2 stools down. What made these places powerful was not that people chose to be social. It was that sociality was built into the structure of showing up. You did not schedule a friendship. You did not plan a hangout. You saw the same people repeatedly, in the same place, at the same time, without anyone organizing it. Psychologists call this repeated unplanned contact, and it is the single strongest predictor of whether 2 people will become friends. In 1980, that contact happened automatically. You walked to the corner store. You sat on the porch. You bowled on Tuesdays. The environment did the work of friendship for you, the way sidewalks do the work of walking. Nobody thanked the sidewalk. Nobody noticed the system. And that is exactly what made it vulnerable. Because when the system started to break, nobody noticed that either. The first thing to go was physical proximity. After World War II, America made a deliberate decision to build outward. Federal highway funding, cheap mortgages, and single-use zoning pushed millions of families into suburbs designed around the car, not the human. Cul-de-sacs replaced street grids. Garages replaced porches. Zoning laws separated homes from shops, churches from schools, and neighbors from each other. The walk to the corner store became a 10-minute drive to a strip mall. By 1980, the average American commute was 21.7 minutes. Today it is 27.6 minutes, a 27% increase. And the share of workers commuting 45 minutes or more has grown from 12% to 17%. Over a lifetime, the average American now spends 408 days simply getting to and from work. Robert Putnam, the Harvard sociologist who wrote Bowling Alone, estimated that suburbanization and commuting alone accounted for 10% of the total collapse in American civic engagement. Every 10 additional minutes of commuting time cuts all forms of civic involvement by 10%. You did not choose to stop seeing your friends. The built environment made seeing them require more time, more planning, and more energy than it ever had before. Friendship went from something that happened to something that had to be scheduled. And once something requires a calendar to exist, it becomes the first thing you cancel when life gets busy. And life was about to get much busier. As the commutes got longer, the hours at work did too. American workers now clock 1,799 hours per year, 182 more than the average across developed nations. 77% work more than 40 hours a week. At the same time, the places where friendship once happened without effort were disappearing beneath them. PTA membership, which peaked at 12 million, collapsed to barely 5 million by 1982. Red Cross volunteers dropped 61%. Boy Scout volunteers fell 26%. Between 1980 and 1998, the number of Americans who bowled actually increased by 10%, but league bowling, the kind that put you in a room with the same people every week, fell by 40%. People were still bowling. They just were not bowling together. The third places Oldenburg had written about were vanishing one by one. Bowling alleys declined 32% between 2005 and 2023. Church attendance fell steadily. The percentage of Americans who identify with no religion at all grew from 17 to 26% in a single decade. Only 15% of Americans still belong to a neighborhood association. Only 10% belong to a sports league. The infrastructure of repeated unplanned contact, the very thing that made friendship automatic, was being demolished, and nothing was replacing it. What filled the void was not a new kind of gathering place. It was a device. In 2014, for the first time, more than half of all Americans owned a smartphone. That same year, time spent with friends, which had held steady at roughly 6.5 hours per week for over a decade, began to fall off a cliff. By 2019, before any pandemic, it had dropped to just over 4 hours. By 2021, it had collapsed to under 3 hours. That is a 55% decline in barely 7 years. The pattern is even more severe among teenagers. 2 decades ago, American teens spent about 140 minutes a day with friends in person outside of school. Today that number is 40 minutes. In the same period, average teen screen time climbed from 7 hours a day to 9. The phone did not just compete with friendship, it replaced the conditions that created it. Boredom used to push you out the front door. Now it pulls you toward a screen. Unstructured time used to mean wandering over to a neighbor's house. Now it means scrolling. Nearly 40% of Americans now report having friendships that exist entirely online. Connections sustained by likes and comments rather than presence and proximity. One psychologist described social media as snacks of connection, replacing the nutrient-dense meal of in-person presence. And the body knows the difference. A meta-analysis of 70 studies found that social isolation reduces lifespan at the same rate as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We traded the porch for the feed. And the cost was not just loneliness, it was years off our lives. We did not forget how to be friends. We bulldozed. The neighborhoods that made it easy, paved over the gathering places where it happened naturally, doubled the commute times, added 200 hours to the work year, filled every quiet moment with a screen, and then asked ourselves why nobody calls anymore. The loneliest generation in American history is also the most connected to everything except each other. What we lost was not just friendship, it was the feeling of being known without trying. The neighbor who noticed when your car was not in the driveway. The bartender who poured your drink before you sat down. The friend who showed up because they lived 4 houses away and your porch light was on. None of that required an app. It required a world that no longer exists. We did not lose our friends. We engineered them out of daily life. One highway, one cul-de-sac, one notification at a time. And we did it so gradually that most people blame themselves for the silence. The friends did not disappear because people changed. They disappeared because everything around them changed first.